Picture this. Korea, 1919. A young man walks into a police station and lays a document on the desk. The officer reads it. His eyes narrow. This is a confession. Not to a crime, but to a belief. The young man has just signed his own arrest warrant. He is 22 years old. He is smiling. His name was Kang Joon-seo. And what happened next would shake an entire nation, fill the prisons of 3 countries, and leave behind a trail of transformed lives so long that historians are still counting. But here is the part of the story almost no one tells. The man who led thousands to healing and freedom spent the last decade of his own life in a darkness so complete that even his closest friends wondered if God had abandoned him. This is only one chapter in the most extraordinary story of faith, suffering, and impossible grace you have never heard. Have you ever watched someone you loved disappear? Not into death, but into a silence so deep you couldn't reach them. That is where this story ends. But it begins somewhere else entirely. It is March 4th, 1897. Joon-seo is born in a small farming village in the South Chungcheong province of Korea. His family grows millet and keeps 3 goats. The house has 4 rooms and a paper door that tears every winter. He is the second of 7 children and the first son, which means everything in a Confucian household. His father is a quiet man who gets up before dawn and does not come back until after dark. And his mother is the kind of woman who can stretch a handful of rice into a meal for 9. By the time Joon-seo is 8, 2 of his younger siblings are dead. A fever comes through the village in the summer of 1905 and takes his 5-year-old sister first. Then his brother, who was only 3. His mother wraps them herself. She doesn't cry in front of the other children, but Joon-seo hears her at night through the paper door. He would write about those sounds years later. He called them the sounds that follow you. Korea in those years is not a free country. Japan has tightened its grip over the peninsula, and the village where Joon-seo grows up is governed by rules he did not vote for and a language he was not born speaking. Japanese is now mandatory in schools. His father tells him to learn it well, not because he agrees with it, but because a man who cannot speak the language of power will always be powerless. Joon-seo learns it well. He is 16 when he encounters the first missionary, a Canadian Presbyterian named Arthur Malcolm, who has been in Korea for 11 years and speaks the local dialect with a northern accent that makes the village children laugh. Malcolm runs a small school out of a church building on the edge of town. Joon-seo goes because his father tells him to, because the school teaches mathematics alongside scripture and the boy has a talent for numbers. He plans to stay 1 month. He stays 3 years. It is not Malcolm who changes him. It is a passage from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verse 35, which Joon-seo reads one afternoon in the autumn of 1914 and cannot put down. Jesus wept. 2 words, the shortest verse in the Bible. He reads them again and again, and something cracks open in him that he cannot close again. The God of the universe, he writes in his journal that night, stood at a grave and cried, "He is not the same after that." By 1917, Joon-seo is 20 years old and studying theology in Seoul, sleeping on a floor mat in a room with 4 other students, eating 1 meal a day, and spending his evenings in a small prayer meeting that begins at 7 and often runs past midnight. The men in the group are serious and young and burning with something they can barely name. They pray for Korea. They pray for Japan. They pray for each other. Sometimes one of them begins to weep without knowing why, and the others simply kneel beside him and put a hand on his shoulder and wait. This is where Joon-seo first begins to feel what he will later describe as a current. Not his own energy, not emotion. Something that moves through him like water through a channel, and when it moves, things happen. The first documented case is a classmate named Byung-ho, who has had a paralyzed left hand since birth. Joon-seo prays for him one Tuesday evening in February 1918. He does not shout, he does not perform. He simply holds Byung-ho's hand in both of his and speaks quietly. Byung-ho will later testify before a gathering of more than 400 people that the feeling was like heat starting in his wrist and spreading upward. He opens and closes his fingers for the first time in his life. He is 23 years old. He sits on the floor for a long time afterward, just opening and closing his hand, watching it. Word spreads the way word always spreads, quietly at first, then suddenly everywhere. And then 1919 arrives and everything changes. March 1st, 1919. Korean independence activists read a Declaration of Independence in Seoul. The Japanese response is swift and brutal. Protests erupt in cities and villages across the country. Thousands are arrested. Some are shot in the streets. The prisons fill faster than they can be emptied. Joon-seo is not a political organizer. He is a theology student. But he watches what is happening, and he makes a decision that will cost him more than he can imagine when he makes it. He walks into the police station on March 9th. He lays down his papers. He says, in Japanese, I am a follower of Jesus Christ, and I believe that every human being is made in the image of God, and therefore I cannot remain silent while my people are being killed for saying so out loud. Do with me what you will. They do. He spends 14 months in Seodaemon prison. The cell is 6 feet by 8 feet. He shares it with 4 other men. The food is a single bowl of barley gruel in the morning and another at night. In winter, the stone walls sweat and then freeze. 2 of the men in his cell become sick within the first month. One of them dies before spring. Joon-seo watches the man die slowly over 3 weeks, and he prays over him every day. And on the last night he holds his hand the same way he held Byung-ho's hand. And this time nothing changes physically, but the man dies peacefully, and the other men in the cell notice that. They ask Joon-seo to pray for them. He prays. For 14 months he prays. The guards hear him through the door at night. One of them, a young Japanese man named Yamamoto Keiji, who is 18 years old and away from home for the first time, begins to linger near the cell. He does not understand everything Joon-seo says, but he understands the tone. Something in it reminds him of his grandmother, who used to sing low songs in the dark when he was small. Yamamoto Keiji will become a Christian before Joon-seo is released. He will lose his position because of it. He will later say it was the best exchange he ever made. Joon-seo is released in May 1920. He is thinner by 30 pounds. He has a cough that stays with him for the rest of his life. He goes back to his village for 1 month to see his family. And when his mother opens the door and sees him standing there, she covers her mouth with both hands and does not speak for a long moment. His father grips his shoulder once, hard, and nods, and goes inside. That is the last time Joon-seo lives at home. Within a year, requests are coming from everywhere. A church in Pyongyang asks him to come for a week of meetings. He goes for a week and stays for 3. The reports that come out of those 3 weeks are the kinds of reports that make sober people uncomfortable and desperate people weep with relief. A woman who has been deaf since childhood hears her daughter's voice for the first time. A man who has been bedridden for 2 years with tuberculosis gets up and walks across the room. A teenager who has not spoken in 4 years after watching his father beaten to death in front of him begins to speak again, haltingly, then steadily, then without stopping. Joon-seo does not take credit for any of it. He is almost aggressive about this. In every meeting, every letter, every conversation, he says the same thing: I am a pipe. A pipe does not make the water, it only carries it. If you are looking at the pipe, you are looking at the wrong thing. But people keep looking at the pipe. By 1923, he has traveled to Manchuria, to China, to Japan itself, into the country that imprisoned him. And in each place the pattern repeats. Meetings, prayer, healings, changed lives. A church leader in Nagasaki writes afterward that he has never seen anything like it in 40 years of ministry. People who come to scoff leave unable to explain what they witnessed. Skeptics write long articles in newspapers trying to debunk the reports, and in doing so generate more interest in the meetings than any advertisement could have. Joon-seo is not managing any of this. He has no organization, no staff, no funds. He travels with 1 change of clothes and a Bible so worn that the spine has been retaped 3 times. He sleeps in whatever room is offered. He eats whatever is put in front of him. When there is no food, he fasts, and he has fasted long enough that a single day without eating does not trouble him at all. He is 30 years old, and he has already seen more than most men see in a lifetime. Then he meets Clara. Her full name is Clara Hoffman. She is the daughter of a German missionary family who has been in Korea since 1908 and grew up in Incheon speaking Korean before she spoke German fluently. She is 26, practical in a way that is almost funny, keeps a notebook where she records every prayer request she hears and writes the answer next to it when it comes. And she has been told by 2 separate mission organizations that she is too direct to be an effective missionary. She considers this a compliment. Joon-seo meets her at a conference in Seoul in September 1924. She is arguing with a senior pastor about whether the people in his congregation are being taught to pray or simply told to pray, which are not the same thing. Joon-seo listens to the argument from across the room. He agrees with her completely. He walks over and says so. They marry in April 1925. The years that follow are the fullest years. They work together in a way that multiplies both of them. Clara keeps the correspondence, manages the requests, writes down the testimonies that Joon-seo would otherwise forget, because his mind is always moving to the next thing. She also tells him the truth about himself, which no one else does, and which he needs more than he knows. When he is impatient, she says so. When he is generous to the point of leaving themselves with nothing, she balances it. When he disappears into prayer for so long that he forgets to eat for 2 days, she puts a bowl of rice in his hands and waits until he eats it. They have 4 children between 1926 and 1932. The work expands into new provinces. By 1930, the number of documented healings connected to Joon-seo's ministry has crossed 3,000. A Japanese government official, attempting to investigate and suppress the meetings, attends one and leaves without writing his report. No one ever learns what he saw. He resigns from his position 6 months later and becomes a pastor. Joon-seo would have laughed at that story if he heard it. He had a laugh that people described as sudden. It arrived before you expected it and was gone quickly, but while it was there, it changed the whole room. Have you ever felt that a life could be going exactly right and still be standing at the edge of something you cannot see? It is the summer of 1934. Joon-seo and Clara are in the northern part of Korea, in a mountainous region near the Chinese border, where a revival has been running for 6 weeks without stopping. The meetings go past midnight. People walk 20 miles through mountain passes to attend. Children are healed. Marriages are restored. An entire village that has been divided by a land dispute for 11 years signs a peace agreement in the back of the church. Because, as the village elder later says, we could not keep fighting after what we saw that night. And then Clara gets sick. It begins as what seems like exhaustion. She is 36 years old and has been working without a real rest for 9 years. She sleeps more than usual. She loses weight. By September, she has a fever that doesn't break. The diagnosis, when it finally comes from a physician in Pyongyang, is typhoid fever complicated by what looks like a second infection in her lungs. The doctor is careful with his words, but his face says everything. Joon-seo prays. He prays the way he has prayed for 3,000 other people, holding her hand, speaking quietly, calling on the God who wept at the grave of a friend. He prays every day. He prays every night. The children kneel with him. The congregation in Pyongyang fasts for a week on her behalf. Clara dies on November 14, 1934. She is 36 years old. She has been married to Joon-seo for 9 years and 4 months. Her prayer notebook, the one where she wrote every request and every answer, is on the table beside her bed. It is completely full. She had started a second one 2 weeks before she died. It has 7 entries. Joon-seo does not speak publicly for 6 weeks. When he comes back, something has changed. Not his faith. Those who watch him closely say his faith is not smaller. But something in him has gone quiet that was once loud. He is gentler in meetings now, less urgent, slower. He listens more than he speaks. He is with his children in a way he wasn't always before, sitting with them in the evenings, asking them questions, and actually waiting for the answers. His youngest daughter, aged 2 when her mother dies, later writes that she does not remember her mother, but she remembers her father's hands. He had a habit of covering his face with his hands when he prayed, she writes, and when he took them away, his face always looked. She searches for the word, washed. The work continues. There is no other word for what to call it. It continues. He goes back to China in 1936. He goes to Hong Kong in 1938. The testimonies accumulate. A woman in Shanghai who has had rheumatoid arthritis for 12 years has the bones in her hands straightened during a prayer meeting, while witnesses watch. A child in Hong Kong with a condition that doctors have called inoperable recovers completely after a night of corporate prayer. A man in Manchuria, who has not eaten in 11 days because of a stomach disorder that nothing could touch, eats a full meal the morning after Joon-seo prays for him. By this time, the political world has shifted around him again. Japan is at war with China. The Korean peninsula is being stripped for resources. Christian gatherings are increasingly surveilled. Joon-seo is arrested for the second time in 1940, this time by the military police, and held for 4 months. The conditions are worse than Seodaemun. He is 43 years old. His cough, the one he has carried since 1920, worsens significantly during those months, and never fully recovers. He is released in early 1941. He is thinner again, quieter again, and slower than before. He goes back to his village for a week. His parents are both gone now. His father died in 1936, his mother 2 years after that, and he stands in the field behind the house where he grew up and stays there for a long time. The neighbor's son, who is 11 years old, watches him from the fence and later tells his own children about it. He just stood there, the boy says, not doing anything, just standing. But it didn't look like doing nothing. It looked like something very hard. Something very hard. After 1941, Joon-seo does not travel internationally. The war makes it impossible. He stays in Korea and moves quietly between small congregations in the south, away from the surveillance that has made the northern cities dangerous. He is largely invisible during these years, which is strange, because everywhere he goes, things happen. A pastor in Daegu calls it the quiet season. He says that Joon-seo in 1943 was more powerful than Joon-seo in 1923, but that now the power moved like an underground river rather than a waterfall. You had to know where to dig, the pastor says. But if you dug there, it was bottomless. Korea is liberated in August 1945. The country erupts with a grief and joy so tangled together that no one has fully sorted them out since. Joon-seo is 48 years old. His 4 children are spread across 2 countries. He has grandchildren he has not yet met. His hair has gone entirely white. He begins to write. In the last decade of his life, Joon-seo fills 11 notebooks with what he calls notes to no one in particular. They are not sermons and they are not theology, and they are barely organized. They are more like a man thinking out loud to God about what he has seen and what he has not understood and what he is still not sure of. He writes about Clara on nearly every 3rd page. He writes about the patients he prayed for who were not healed, because there were many of those, and he has never been a man who pretends otherwise. He writes about the question he has been asked 10,000 times, why does God heal some and not others? And he does not answer it, he just turns it over and holds it up to the light and says, I have lived with this question for 40 years, and I am less certain of my answer now than when I began, but I am more certain of the one I ask. He writes that once and then underlines it. In the winter of 1954, Joon-seo begins to have strokes. Small ones at first, then a larger one in March that leaves him unable to use his right hand. He learns to write with his left. His eldest daughter, a woman named Mira, who has inherited her mother's practicality and her father's stubbornness in a combination that is formidable, comes to live with him and care for him. She reads to him in the evenings. Sometimes scripture, sometimes newspapers, sometimes the letters that continue to arrive from people all over Asia who want him to know what happened after he prayed for them 30 years ago. He listens to these letters with his eyes closed and a small expression on his face that Mira cannot fully describe. It is not pride, she says later. It is more like what you would feel if someone told you a garden was still growing that you planted in a place you left a long time ago. He dies on September 3, 1955. He is 58 years old. Mira is beside him. His last coherent words, spoken 2 days before in Korean, the pipe has done its job. Whatever is left, it belongs to the water. At his memorial service in Seoul, a man stands who was in Seodaemun prison with him in 1919. He is now 62 years old, a pastor in Busan, with 3 grown children and 6 grandchildren, one of whom is studying theology. He speaks for 4 minutes, he says. I was dying when I met Joon-seo, not physically, the other kind. The kind where the life goes out of a person before the body follows. He prayed for me one night in a cell that smelled like stone and cold and something I don't have a name for, and when he finished, I was not the same. I don't know what else to say about it. I am standing here 55 years later, so I think that speaks for itself. The congregations Joon-seo helped establish across Korea, China, and Manchuria have, in the decades since his death, grown into hundreds of churches. His notebooks were published posthumously in 1961 and have been translated into 7 languages. His youngest daughter, the one who does not remember her mother but remembers her father's hands, became a physician who worked for 40 years in rural medical clinics in the Korean countryside, mixing medicine with prayer in a way that her colleagues sometimes found uncomfortable and her patients consistently found effective. She said she learned it from watching her father. Not the praying, she clarified, the combining, the refusal to separate the physical from the spiritual as though they belonged to different worlds. But here is the question that matters. The one Joon-seo asked in his notebooks and never answered and didn't pretend to answer. Why him? Why did the current move through this particular pipe, in this particular century, in this small country that most of the world wasn't watching? He didn't know. He said so plainly. He wrote that he was not a special man. He wrote that he was a man from a village who learned to do one thing well, which was to stay in contact long enough for something larger than himself to move. He wrote that the secret was not technique and not personality, and not even faith. Exactly. It was more like posture. The posture of a person who has stopped trying to manufacture the water and has simply learned to hold still and let it flow. Lake once said, "The secret of heaven's power was not in the doing, but in the being." Kang Joon-seo spent 58 years learning the same lesson in a different language, in a different country, under different skies, and arrived at the same place. What about you? Your education? Joon-seo grew up in a house with a paper door. Your past. He carried the sound of his mother, crying through a wall for the rest of his life. Your fear. He walked into a police station and signed his own arrest warrant. Your age. He was filling notebooks the winter the strokes began. Comment below. Use me, God. My generation is waiting. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss these stories of the people who refused to believe that ordinary lives couldn't carry extraordinary things. And if you want to know what happens when a woman with no formal training and no institutional backing becomes the most documented healer in the 20th century, check out this next story. Her name was hidden for decades. The records were sealed, and what she did in a single village in West Africa over 30 years has never been fully explained.